Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Monetize Your IoT and SaaS Service Offerings in 2021, brought to you by Technology Services Industry Association and sponsored by BluLogix. My name's Vanessa Lucero, and I'll be your moderator for today. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar will be recorded. A link to the recording of today's presentation will be sent out within the next 24 hours via email. Audio will be delivered via streaming. All attendees will be in a listen-only mode, and your webinar controls, including volume, are found in the toolbar at the bottom of the webinar player. We encourage your comments and questions. If you think of a question for the presenters at any point, please submit through the Ask a Question box on the top left corner of the webinar player, and we will open it up for a verbal Q&A portion at the end of today's session. Lastly, feel free to enlarge the slides to full screen at any time by selecting one of the full screen button options, which will appear in the top right corner of the slide player. I would now like to introduce our presenters today. John Ragsdale, Distinguished Vice President of Technology Research for TSIA, Yusuf Yagmor, CEO of BluLogix, and Chad Repp, Business Development Manager of Connect Telematics. As with all of our TSIA webinars, we do have a lot of exciting content to cover in the next 45 minutes, so let's jump right in and get started. John, over to you.
Well, thank you, Vanessa. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. You know, over the years, we've done quite a few programs for you around why you should be adopting IoT. And I think for a long time, the Internet of Things was sort of in the evangelizing phase, why companies should care, why companies should invest. Well, we've definitely seen adoption and understanding of this technology grow dramatically, and today we're taking a different focus. We're going to give you some ideas on how you can actually monetize your investments in IoT and even create some new offerings. So let's dive in. I'm going to focus on three particular use cases for IoT with revenue implications. First is premium service offers, and I think we'll start there, and everybody's pretty familiar with that area. And then we're going to talk about how customer success organizations are leveraging IoT in measuring adoption. And finally, enabling SaaS offers. There's a lot of new capabilities now, and I think that we're seeing buyers are much more interested in some of these consumption-based pricing models. So you've probably seen this remote services continuum previously. It was first developed by Val Golovsky, who runs our support and field service research groups. And when he first created this a few years ago, most companies were kind of toying with this first area on the left around service efficiency, how connected devices and the Internet of Things would allow support technicians to easily access remote technology to run diagnostics, check for error conditions, etc. And then moving up the chain, we start getting into a little more proactive mode. How can we leverage those IoT connections to start monitoring customer equipment, detecting when errors are about to happen, a part's about to fail, and that allows us to be a lot more proactive, reduce service downtime, and a lot of this is being put into these premier service offerings. Now, when this diagram was first developed, the idea of pricing offers on customer outcomes was kind of futuristic, and we're absolutely seeing that is happening today, whether it's measuring how much technology a customer is consuming, how many scans a piece of radiology equipment is doing, how many widgets are coming off a factory assembly line. Understanding how people are consuming and delivering value with technology allows you to begin pricing in some different ways. So a little data for you on the reducing service margins and where a lot of you got started with IoT. I've shown some data here from 2018 to 2021. It's pretty dramatic how we have driven down the cost of service delivery with a lot of automation. But regardless of the numbers, you still see that remotely resolving an issue is dramatically lower than having to go on site. So the more of this connected technology we're allowed to leverage, we don't need to send as many field techs on site. And over the last year, even sending somebody on site was rather difficult. When we start looking at connecting customers and leveraging those connections for premier service offerings, I've got some data points from a survey we just completed at the end of last year. And unfortunately, on average, less than 46% of companies, almost half of our members, say less than 20% of their customers are connected to them. And, that is a real challenge. If you're not able to connect to that customer, it's going to be harder to sell them additional capabilities leveraging that connection. Quickly, when we ask, why you're having trouble getting some of those connections, on the internal side, the biggest challenge is just sales. Sales is not able to articulate the value of these connected device premier programs. And, I'm sure if you're a TSIA member, you've heard this before, but the product sales team is not the ideal people to be selling these premier service offerings. The companies that we see that have a dedicated service sales team tend to be much better at that. And what are the biggest external roadblocks? 2/3 of companies say access to data, almost half say security, and I think those two are very, very closely linked. Customers have to be very comfortable with how the connection is secure, encrypted data transmittal, et cetera. And a lot of that goes back to making sure the salespeople know how to articulate that to overcome customer concerns. So my final slide, moving into some more strategic areas of monetizing IoT. When we ask customer success organizations what is their primary charter, 84% say adoption. So they've got to have a way to understand how their customers are using and consuming the technology. And we also have data on what level of consumption data they have. And unfortunately, the majority of companies know nothing more than how many logins from their customers. And an IoT plugin will give you a lot more granular information, exactly what parts of the application they're using, what process flow, what fields they're filling out, what screens they're using, and that will give you a much better idea of what they're actually consuming. And finally, on the pricing side, as I said, 5-6 years ago, the idea of pricing based on outcomes or consumption was a little far-fetched. But as we see from this data point, again from the end of last year, per user pricing, which was the dominant pricing model in the on-premise world, is now 40% of cloud offerings. 35% is based on consumption of the technology, 25% on actual service units or the units being delivered by the technology. So both of those require a really strong understanding of what is being consumed, what is being completed, exactly how customers are leveraging the technology. So if you've got an IoT offering available today in your support organization and you're looking at it primarily as a cost-cutting or a productivity thing, that's a great place to start. But once you have that in, you need to start partnering with your service sales organizations, definitely your sales and marketing organizations, and start finding some more interesting ways to leverage that technology, in particular, to create some new offers and make a little money from those investments. So I would like to turn things over now to our first guest speaker. Youssef Yaghmour is the CEO of BluLogix. And Youssef, the last time we were together was for the Technology Summit back in October. So glad to have you back.
Well, thank you, John. Very good to be with you again. And welcome to the audience. I'll be happy to do a little bit of elaboration on what John just started, which is how to monetize the IoT services. So thank you for that intro. Just a quick introduction about BluLogix. We were founded in 2013. We process close to 2 to 3 billion transactions every month on behalf of our customers. We also process close to or approaching about $1 billion of e-commerce transactions, GMV, as some e-commerce terminology would like to call that. BluLogix has been recognized by industry analysts as a top 5 monetization platform provider. That's MGI Research. We're also on the list of recommended monetization billing platforms on Gartner Group. That's BluLogix. My name is Yusuf Yagmour. As John said, I'm the founder and the CEO of the company. I still chair the technology and architecture. I'm still attached to that. The 25 plus years of enterprise technology experience with special focus and emphasis on digital transformation and technology and business leadership. In the previous jobs that I've taken, I have taken executive positions in the AI, NLP, telecom, and other transformation space. I'm still very focused on digital transformation as an advisor and as one of the thought leaders on the market. As John said, this trend of IoT adoption is accelerating on the market. And I believe the last year, with all the challenges that we have seen on the COVID side and on the technology side, I think we've seen more adoption. The 5G infrastructure that's been widely available now has definitely accelerated that and added more fuel and more speed to that adoption, helped service providers to introduce more solution. We clearly see a significant path of growth in multiple industries. This is an example of some of the industries that we see a definite growth in those sectors: transportation, industrial, smart cities, healthcare, and a few others. So what I would like to talk about today is how can you monetize these services. There's a lot of assets in the IoT stack. As you build an IoT solution, you start to have a wealth of information, but that also comes with some challenges. So I will touch a little bit on the operational challenges that the service provider will be faced with, and then what's the recommended approach to providing a solution for these challenges. Excuse me. And then the second point, I will talk a little bit about how to monetize these assets, because it can actually be a very good source of revenue for the service provider. The challenge is, how do you best monetize that and translate that into revenue? As you build an IoT stack as a service provider, you will have to actually interact and deal and utilize and implement multiple technologies and multiple infrastructures. From the actual device that you would like to say, you have some kind of tracking device or a telemetric device that you will see, as you will see with HED. As a use case, you have a device that is installed on, let's say, some kind of a construction equipment. You have a connectivity that actually takes that device and connects it to the IoT industrial platform, which actually collects the data from the sensors that are part of this device, let's say, and then you have the infrastructure and the security. Just listing 4 or 5 components of that infrastructure and stack, you already have a wealth of information and assets that makes it difficult to manage. Add to that, what's the enterprise that is using this device on that equipment? Who's the user? What's the equipment that it's actually installed on? What is the location? Where is that being used? By the time you put all of that together, you actually have a wealth of information, and at the same time, some challenges in managing this IoT service, from the device to the equipment, etc. And to be able to solve the growth and scale that solution and be able to serve the customer in a more economical fashion, you would like to track this data. You would like to be able to connect the enterprise, let's say, that is using that equipment, that has the device on it, and who's the user, and what kind of license ID does this device have access to on the IoT platform? What kind of connectivity? What is the carrier? What kind of speed? What kind of bandwidth? What kind of data volume that this device is supposed to have? What is the security stack for that? By the time you set up all of that, unless you have one central data store that says that connects all of these pieces of the data together, it becomes extremely difficult to manage the service and manage the growth and be able to translate that into revenue. We have a very good case actually from one of the implementations that we have done. It's a transportation asset management company that has a customer. That customer has 800 trucks. Now, 800 trucks, of course, with supposedly 800 location devices and asset management devices installed in each one of these trucks. But this customer ended up with 950 connections, although it's only 800 trucks and 800 devices, but that customer ended up with 950 connections with the carrier and carrier provider of connectivity, which means at some point one of the devices became faulty. It had to be replaced. It had some connectivity problem. The truck went to maintenance and the device got replaced. As you go through that cycle, you end up with so many devices that have been removed, but the connection of which has not been terminated. It's just a good use case or an example of how difficult it is to actually manage that unless you have one single system of record that actually connects all these pieces of information together. Naturally, when you are looking for a solution, you would like to have a solution that helps you managing these end-to-end solution, end-to-end data points and data variation. Now take all of that and try to translate that into some monetary value, and you will be looking at the content that all these sensors and device data produces. Who's the integrators? How did you deliver that? What was the connectivity? Who's the carrier for that? Every one of these single points can actually be translated into a monetization value for the service. You end up with a lot of assets. That asset being the equipment, being the rental, the data, the content, the quality of the content, the type of content. Let's take an example, say, from a company that does take video using drones for agriculture spaces or land. You have a drone that takes infrared images. You have a drone that takes high quality video images. You have a drone that takes low quality video image. Simply providing that service at a monthly subscription fee isn't really the best way to monetize that. You would like to be able to charge your customers based on the quality of that video, based on the speed of delivery, based on the access time, and all that is actually a stack of or layers of how you can monetize and how you can realize the value of these service offerings. Naturally, you would want the tool that you use for monetization to be able to handle that and to support that. And leave that example, go to, let's say, a company that has billboards of advertising. Imagine that you put a sign for some kind of an advertising when the traffic in the street is very low versus putting a signage or a billboard advertising when the traffic is at 95% capacity. As an IoT provider for that service, you would be able to say, I can charge a much higher price when the traffic on the street is actually at 95% versus 10%. These are all use cases that you can actually use them as example how to monetize. So you would like to be able to translate all of that into revenue, translate the platform, the subscription, the consumption, the content, the quality of the content, the rule base of the content with access, a content with service. I'd like that content to send me certain notification when a specific data point is detected so that the end customer can actually benefit from that notification. Go to an even more sophisticated case. You would like to order that company that offers infrared drone video surveillance, for example, to actually go on demand and take certain video images for a specific user on a specific time in a specific location. All of that are actually services available by IoT today. The challenge is that basically service providers are faced with: how do we monetize that, and do we have the right tool to actually sell this service on demand with consumption and as the customer consumes? These are just a few cases of how you can monetize the service and what you should be looking at when you actually try to look for a solution to monetize your IoT devices. I'd like to stop here. Basically, I think that's a good overview of what that looks like. and then cede the floor to my colleague, Chad, to give you a good use case, how you can implement that in real life.
Thank you, Yusuf, and welcome everyone, and thanks for having me on here today. Wanted to talk about HED a little bit, give everyone some background on the company and where we came from and why we identified and how we identified the need for a platform such as BluLogix BluIQ services. So HED is a smaller organization, started 35 years ago. We actually sell to manufacturers of off-highway heavy equipment. So we're not a end solution provider, but we're more of a component provider that works with the OEMs to integrate our capabilities and our modules into vehicles to help them do jobs. So you heard about Yusuf talking through monetization of work and prioritization of information flow. We do that at a controls level. We also do that within telematics. So when we work with our customers, we do a little bit more than just provide them hardware. So we actually work with the engineering teams directly at the OEM to design and implement these solutions based on the needs that they have with their customers. So we have a dedicated application engineering team. We also have our own core design engineering team that build the components, electronic control modules and such, and then we actually do manufacture them as well. So we're a pretty comprehensive organization for the size that we are, and we look to work with our customers to partner with them, and we also partner with other solution providers like BluLogix to increase our capabilities and our offerings to our customer based on the needs that they have. So the products that we historically and have offered and offer today are controllers, electronic control modules, keypads, displays, jog dials, and telematics modules. And along with telematics modules, the platforms and services that help go along with that. And that's what we're going to talk about here today in a little bit more depth. So as you saw from a product standpoint and our background, we're primarily a hardware organization, but over the last few years, we've expanded upon that to become a service provider as well through the telematics offering. So without a platform or a portal environment to visualize data that's being collected off of a module, telematics is pretty useless and doesn't really give a lot of value other than a whole lot of data that sits on a module. So we've incorporated a portal environment. We also have a on-module experience. So within every single module, a user can connect to that module with a smartphone or a tablet using Wi-Fi and see real-time what's happening with that device. So what do these things do for customers and OEMs? A couple of different things. From an OEM standpoint, it helps them identify issues with the vehicles, understand warranty claims if the vehicle was misused or not, gives them the ability to send or remote into the vehicle and diagnose it without sending a technician on site. You heard John talk about that earlier. That in itself saves a lot of time and money and helps the manufacturer or the service groups identify the issues so that if they do send someone out, they can resolve it in a first-time trip rather than multi-trip experience. And then we also have, within the portal, you get all your alerting, your geofencing, which is more focused typically to the end user or the fleet management team, gives them the ability to understand where the product or machine is at any point in time, what's the status of it, is there maintenance that needs to come due? Things of that nature can all be defined. And within HED's product, we've taken this a little bit farther than your traditional telematics offering, where we actually have a full configurable offering. So at the module side, you can define what parameters or signals to collect from the machine. You can define how to visualize those in Portal, what information is being sent to Portal, what's being saved on the module. You have full control as an OEM in this solution, which is why we really call it more of a platform as a service, because an OEM can now take these tool sets in any shape, form they want from HED and implement them as their own. So now that organization has their own standard telematics service offering to their customers, which is very powerful for a lot of groups. And what makes it challenging, though, is how do you manage all of these things, as Yusuf was talking about? You have a portal environment, you have a module, you have data sessions, you have cellular transmissions, you have all these components, and how do you pull them all together? And this is something HED struggled with on the front end of things with our telematics, and saw it as a challenge pretty early on in the life cycle of the product, and knew we had to find a way to bring that all together through a single platform to manage them and do that holistically from a web interface and cloud perspective. And that's where we engage with BluLogix and the BluIQ product. And we've implemented that within our solution and offering. And we're actually looking to take this one step farther, where we now want to offer this out to our customers as a benefit, because being a white label product, as I mentioned, our customers, the OEMs, are going to have the same challenges. How do I turn on cellular for this subscription and portal-only services for this subscription? And this platform is being able to do that for us. So wanted to go through and talk through a couple of the key outcomes that we envisioned going into this project before we jump into a roundtable session here. So the first one was process improvements. We had identified that it was costing from an internal perspective, anywhere from $5 to $7 per order just to provision all the services, from customer service through our support staff, all having to touch this one order just to turn cellular on, just to turn portal services on, things of that nature. So when you start magnifying and scaling from an number of orders perspective, that becomes very painful. $5 to $7 per order can add up quite quickly, especially when you get into thousands of devices. A second outcome that we were striving for was self-serve management. We knew that our customers were looking for an on-demand, real-time experience from a portal standpoint. They wanted to be able to go in and configure things and turn services and functionality on when they needed them, and not have to wait for a process or for a PO to be created and submitted to HED to process internally, and then get back to them. We sell and support internationally, so we also have time zone challenges. So part of this is the implementation of a web interface and an e-commerce storefront, where our customers, the OEM, will be able to go in and register for and subscribe to services, and all of the provisioning that's required through the cell carriers, through the platform providers, all gets enabled through that subscription and will automatically be turned on. So you get a real on-demand subscription capability. And the third and final outcome was this billing as a service. We wanted to take this functionality and expose it to our customers, the OEM, so that they can leverage it, because a lot of manufacturers, like ourselves, are used to building a product and selling that from a single transaction perspective. And when you start layering on the complexities of the different platforms that integrate with this, as well as the reoccurring revenue models, it becomes a challenge to manage. We learned firsthand that keeping up to date on renewals and tracking all the unique identifiers from a module perspective, a vehicle perspective, and subscription plan perspective became a really big challenge really quick. And this platform has helped us move forward with that, these outcomes, and achieve them from a product perspective, and has been a great help to HED. So,
thank you.
Oops.
Thank you, Chad. I appreciate that. Just a quick comment on what you presented, and that was a great use case. Imagine that HED or the OEM customer of HED or someone that is actually using both of them as an infrastructure would like to take the data consumed by these devices, detected or read by the sensors on these devices, and use some kind of an AI module to make certain decisions and recommendations and proactively do, let's say, maintenance or send some engineer, as Chad was suggesting, to that and build decision-making process as a result of the data that you're connecting. It's no longer just subscription or basic consumption. It's now actually using artificial intelligence, which requires more rules to decide how you want to monetize that service and how you want to charge the end user based on the benefits that you're collecting. So that IoT actually brings all these challenges, but at the same time, it actually takes the implementation of these technologies to the next level so that users can benefit and service providers know how to monetize these services and benefit from that. So thank you, Chad. John, back to you.
You're welcome.
Vanessa, it looks like we've got some questions coming in from the audience. You want to take us through some of the Q&A?
Absolutely. And then I would also just like to remind everybody that if you would like to submit a question, please enter it in the Ask a Question box in the upper left-hand corner of the webinar player, and we will get through as many questions as time allows. That being said, I'll jump right in because we do have quite a few. I think the first one is going to be for you, Yusuf, and it's from James. And they ask, what are the core business challenges you are addressing with these types of projects?
When on the monetization side, what businesses would like to do is how do we define our service offering? How do we define these assets, put them in a form of a catalog, create bundles out of it, define the pricing that you would like to use to sell these services. So that's one core challenge, basically, that we usually start with as we are onboarding customers and helping them transform and go through that journey. The second one is the operational challenges, is how do we deal with these multiple sources of data on the provisioning side, on the activation of service, on the collection of data, and how do we establish a common denominator or identifier that actually connects these pieces together. So these are usually two good examples of the core challenges that we face and help customers with.
Okay. Our next question is from Stephen, and this is for you, Chad. Why did you select BluLogix?
Yeah, so we went through a pretty comprehensive review of the market and seeing other platforms and providers out there. Ultimately, BluLogix for us felt like the right fit from a scale and a size perspective. They had all the capabilities, and they had a model that helped us as a smaller organization, and really our product was newer to market, helped us gain that first step of entry into the marketplace with a billing platform and scale with us. A lot of the other solutions that we had seen had a pretty high price tag to them, to be honest with you, and a lot more of a back-end only infrastructures, I would say, which would require HED to do a lot more of the front-end development from a web interface perspective and things of that nature. So there was a true partnership there with BluLogix and Yusuf and team to help us get implemented and get moving forward. So that was the primary driver.
Thank you, Chad.
Okay, let's go to Julie's question next. And Chad, I believe this is also for you. So what is the one thing you would have done over?
God, hindsight is always per 2020, right? So I think there's one primary thing I would say if we could do over and do differently would be looking at this type of platform and looking at BluLogix probably earlier in our product lifecycle. When we engaged with BluLogix, we already had probably about a year and a half of services being provided out to customers, and we were trying to manage a lot of those subscriptions and pricing through traditional models in our traditional ERP system, which became a challenge. And that migration in itself was a bit of a challenge as well that we had to walk through and work through together. But if had to do it over again, I would just say start a little earlier in the product lifecycle.
Hey, Vanessa, it's John. I wanted to jump in with a question for Yusuf and maybe for Chad. You know, the majority of TSIA members started out as on-premise companies, and they're moving to the cloud, some of them very successfully. Some of them are being dragged kicking and screaming. And one of the common problems I encounter is on the technology side, because they're tech companies, they think they should be building all this infrastructure themselves. And I'm not saying that being highly successful. And I'm curious, is that something that you see that you're kind of coming in after an attempt at an internal development? And could you maybe just give a high-level answer on why going with best of breed makes a lot more sense than building it yourself?
Well, the challenge of building it yourself is number one, the cost. I mean, just imagine the amount of investment that you have to put upfront to build the solution, own it and maintain it, and obviously grow with it and advance it and enhance it as the industry makes progress in that. That's the first challenge. The second, which is probably more important than the first one, and that is, well, do you have the right resources that really knows what it takes to build a solution like this? Mm-hmm. A lot of I would say the companies that make the decision to go that would think that having some IT resources and development capabilities in-house is enough to actually build that. I can tell you that if we are to look at the amount of investment that we put in the technology, BluLogix would like to call it technical excellence, the amount of development or the size and cost of development work in this huge investment that we've put in the platform and infrastructure is no more than 20%. 80% is the know-how and the processes and the exposure to the industry and having tried that out with multiple customers. Compare having a provider that has dealt with 100+ business cases and companies with somebody that's building that just for themselves. Luckily, we do see that fading away gradually as you move along. I would add to that the fact that now these solutions are available as SaaS solutions. I think that also encourages those companies because the cost difference is going to be significant.
Chad, was that ever something you ran into on your journey about internal folks wanting to run up that hill themselves?
Not specific to this type of service and functionality, but others, yes. And I think Yusuf hit the nail on the head with the comment about knowledge and experience. And even if you bring that into your organization may not have the processes or the mindsets to support that experience and that skill set that you bring into the company. So it does make it very challenging to build something like this or any of these IoT solution platforms from the ground up is becoming a larger lift than ever. Now, granted, with AWS and Azure and stuff like that, bringing out functionality, they're taking some of those steps quicker, making some of those steps a little bit easier, but there's still a lot of challenge and a knowledge ramp-up period that has to occur.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Vanessa, I think we may have time for one more question.
Okay, I think this one piggybacks best on the last question, and that being moving to a subscription, consumption, or usage-based service seems costly. How do we pivot our business model to ensure success for customers?
Was that a question for me, Vanessa?
I think it is. Yes, please go ahead, Yusuf.
It's start gradually is the best. I mean, do it step by, do it in phases. You don't have to translate everything into migrate everything and go through the journey, do everything at once. That's always a good lesson in this industry and in others. Try to migrate, try to basically set the project into a few phases and start with something that is achievable. Start with the subscription and basically the next level, which is recurring, and then go into consumption, and then go into on demand, and then go into advanced content and rule-based monetization rules. That's probably how it should be planned.
I'd agree with you there, Yusuf, as well. I think it's really about building a solid foundation and growing upon it. And starting out, I've seen it in my 12 plus years in IoT space that more and more often people try to take the total solution and bring it all in or deploy it all at one shot. And it becomes too unwieldy and challenging to, number one, manage, let alone evaluate its success, because you're trying to get all this value from all these different spots in small nuggets. So focusing it down to core functionality, implementing that, and then building upon it and evolving it over time is where I see the greatest success within organizations and deployments.
Okay. Well, I will ask Chad first if you have any final thoughts you would like to share with our audience today, and then open it up to Yusuf as well.
Final thoughts, start early, start small, and grow from there is the best I can say. Take your time. There's a lot of opportunity in the market today from an IoT perspective. People are talking about all kinds of different projects and opportunities that I'm hearing about, and they're from all different sides of the world, whether it's from an industrial perspective, a operator safety perspective. There's value in all kinds of value throughout the IoT chain, I'll call it. Just look to identify where you want to focus it and start to grow it and develop it from there.
And Yusuf, is there anything you would like to share with the audience before we end today?
I'd say part of solving the monetization problem has to be solving the process challenges within the organization. It's not enough to get the right tools. You also have to look at how you can transform your processes and either retrain your people or get the right expertise that can help you go through that digital transformation journey.
And my final ad would be that over the last few years, TSIA has done a lot of research reports and keynote presentations about the transformation required to go from on-premise to the cloud and subscription pricing, outcome-based pricing. If you're familiar with the FISH model, that is really what we've been talking about today, that you've got to make a lot of initial upfront investments in order to get long-term profitability and much lower cost of delivery and ultimately improve margins through the entire customer life cycle. So in the first days when we were talking about this, we were asking people to take a leap of faith with us. But when you look at stories like what Chad shared today from telematics, you're going to have to dig in. And if you haven't gotten started yet, the challenges your competitors have. So I think this is the year we're seeing people making a lot of investments in their infrastructure. And hopefully we've convinced you today that if you haven't started, this is the time to start.
Okay. Well, we have come to the conclusion of today's live webinar. And now just a couple of quick reminders before we sign off for today. There will be an exit survey at the end of today's webinar. Please take a few minutes to provide your feedback on the content and your experience by filling out that brief survey, and a link to the recorded version of today's webinar will be sent out within the next 24 hours. I'd now like to take this time to thank our presenters, John, Yusuf, and Chad, for delivering an outstanding session. And thank you to everyone for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's webinar, How to Monetize Your IoT and SaaS Service Offerings in 2021. brought to you by Technology and Services Industry Association and sponsored by BluLogix. We look forward to seeing you at our next TSIA webinar. Take care, everyone.